want to workshop a little bit of an idea that I think has been a little bit in the public consciousness for years now, and it's this idea. Okay, the idea in the public consciousness isn't exactly where I'm taking it, but basically a highly developed sort of matrix of the different it's a highly developed fictional universe where, because most fictional universes have one thing going on. They have, like the wizarding world of Harry Potter has spells, and people use spells. And then some people will like ride some beasts or something, but that's like an ancillary thing. So that's like a little bit of a level up for, you know what I mean? Or like Yu-Gi-Oh, it's all about the cards. Or Pokemon is, of course, mostly about the Pokemon fighting. In some cases, there's more of an adventure to it. I haven't seen much of Pokemon. I didn't really enjoy the show that much. But I've seen that the movies there's some more raw combat sometimes, rather than just like a little game. Things like that. So, one thing that's been coming up a lot on YouTube, or, Rick and Morty does this. It's not coming up. I think there's a little bit of a hesitance for, for banking this idea on the big screen or from like real studios for the most part, because it's just not really been done before. Just as far as from a production standpoint, I think it's a quite risky thing, because it's like there's a predictable structure when, okay, kid is living normal life and then turns a corner and then is in fantastic world that has X and Y fantastic elements, and then that's it. And everything is really like, things are fairly straightforward. The hero does his thing. There's like one system mainly, and then new elements come in sometimes. This what I'm talking about, I haven't really explained it well yet, but this highly developed part of the idea is like, okay, what about a world where characters will fight, like, okay, let's say for an example, some characters meet up, they run into each other, they're enemies, they start shooting, someone pulls out a Pokeball, and some bizarre creature comes out of it to fight for them. The other character uses some kind of elemental powers, or just throwing ideas out, like a Green Lantern ring or something. And the idea behind all of this, is like, it's not even really an idea. It's just, it's the logical next step of how would these things actually interact. I guess in that sense it is an idea, but it's not really its own idea, right? So one thing that I had in mind is that if Pokemon were a real thing, or given that Pokemon exists in the world, I think that Pokemon would be like this, it would be like the go-to. It would be like imagine thinking of throwing a grenade, but you throw a ball and it's like Charizard. Of course I wouldn't use Charizard, but I think the Pokemon system is really, really interesting. And then, and I think a lot of this comes from because I'm into the occult, and like shadow games, for example. Shadow games are really interesting to me because, of Yu-Gi-Oh, because if you think about Enochian chess with like the Rosicrucians do, or it's called Rosicrucian chess or Golden Dawn chess or Enochian chess, understanding the rules of that game, it's a chess game, but it's magic. And personally, I think that probably that there were real games like that at one point. My spirits told me about something called Demon Chess, but they related it to Yu-Gi-Oh, but it's not that similar to Yu-Gi-Oh. It's just um, just a random interesting thing. Um, so, but especially thinking about, okay, what if what if Yu-Gi-Oh was more like Enochian chess, but Enochian chess had stakes where like, if you lose Enochian chess, you could actually like maybe die, which is perhaps even the case. People will put Enochian chessboards into their drawer, and then the drawer will like open on its own or something, things like that, because the power is it's just so much power. It's channeling these beings so much, all these images stacked or something. That's my guess. Um, so at least that's what magicians on Reddit say. I haven't seen it. I will say I made one little foray into Enochian, and it was like, whoa, you know. A friend of mine told me that you can't tell when you're awake or you're asleep because it's so powerful. Um, I don't know what he's getting at with that. I don't know if it means it causes a lot of hallucinations, but what I'm getting, yeah, just especially with because one thing is like power systems. People talk about power systems. Yeah, in my real life, I see, a lot of how these magic systems, because there's a lot of talk about different power systems of different IP, different intellectual property, different like shows and stuff. But I see that in real life, so it makes me think a lot about what is the intrinsic something behind all of this. What's intrinsic behind like say Green Lantern and Star Wars, the Force, Green Lantern powering and like. So yeah, one of the things I'm thinking about now is like Final Fantasy, because Final Fantasy, the series, has a lot of different things going on, and I think that kind of chaotic, a million things going on at once type thing, which is, I think Japan, I think Japanese media kind of started the whole trend of things being overstimulating. I could be wrong about that, but I mean, there's Western cartoons right at the beginning that were also very stimulating, but yeah, this highly developed world idea. I especially think about Pokemon being like the first thing someone's gonna that a lot of people are gonna throw a Pokemon first, if it's readily available, and I would think Pokemon would be something where, yeah, I think that they would be, I think in a world where magical animals are prevalent, yeah, Pokemon would be a common weapon. Like you find some kind of unicorn type thing in the wild, or whatever. Right? I think that's a really fun idea, and I think it would be it would be interesting to think about the logistics of it too, of especially like an energetic animal, like let's say a phoenix per se. Like if a phoenix is principally energy, if it's principally fire, and of course all beings are. So then it'd be the question of like, would it have to be this special class of beings that are more, almost like elemental beings? So it's almost more adjacent to magic than like kind of the kind of more magical sci-fi, the way it is in the actual Pokemon. That could be interesting. Um, the other thing would be like, what if the Pokeball could like almost. Okay, here's an idea. What if what the Pokeball does is it teleports the being, but it teleports it like it half teleports it, and then it holds, I don't know, whatever's in the middle of the teleportation, and then when you release the being, it's like teleported on the other. It does the other half of the teleportation. I think that's part of why you don't really feel like, okay, it's like Pokemon, for example, is a kid's show, so you don't really think about it too much. But yeah, I don't know if it's so uncanny really as a concept and as a sci-fi concept. I think the real issue to me that always bothered me with Pokemon is like, so do they have to spend a lot of time training the animals to actually fight? And what world is this that the world is just filthy with? The world is just totally saturated with magical beings that are, Bucephalus, unicorns, all kind of, what is it, phoenixes, the very top tier of fantastic beings in our own world, that may or may not have existed or may or may not still exist, are kind of just normal animals in their world. I think it's curious that the Pokemon world is very similar to ours, even though it's a world that contains such fabulous beings, and the fabulous beings are more or less fairly docile. So I think there's a lot of things. See, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying with highly developed world is like, it's a like how does the whole thing kind of work? And I don't think it needs to be like insane. I'm not really caring about how it affects like normal people, and I think this is a little bit of something that makes it hard for my work for people to connect with it. But I think also though, the way I do stuff is a little like, the worlds that I'm thinking of are almost a little more elitist in the sense that like normal people aren't really interesting and aren't involved. I don't feel like trying to convince any random normie that they're special or something. Like, I think that's a bit of a propaganda point through a lot of the media, is like, oh, everyone's special, everyone, and, I think everyone has potential to do things and whatnot, but, I think it's kind of a moot point. I think there's some spiritual thing to it. Of course, Hollywood and whatnot is pushing some kind of neo-Gnostic type agenda, type philosophy. So in that way, I think it's interesting from that perspective. But I think I'm not really that interested in it because I've just seen it my whole life. And most of the time when people are coming from, let's say, quote unquote, the bottom of society, what will they end up hoping to be is like a businessman or something. Okay. I mean, I think the rags to riches story is interesting. I think that the story of I think the story of Aladdin's interesting because, yeah, I think that Aladdin is more interesting because excuse me. Aladdin is like, he's not a normal person. He has a different consciousness than, he's a thief, and a thief isn't exactly that much like, it's not like normal people are all bottom dwelling, degenerates or whatever. Or especially Aladdin's interesting because he has this sort of he's a thief, but it's sort of like I don't know. He's clever in a sense, and he's not such a bad guy. Let's say I'm not gonna say he's a nice guy. I don't know that even the Disney film makes that claim. So. But back to my whole thing of highly developed world. It's a world that's more interested in some of these structures, or not. I'm not gonna go the anime route and spend a lot of time talking about, what the abilities do or anything. I'm not interested in enough in that. I probably won't do that. I think sometimes I will, but I think eventually I'll just take for granted that, okay, this thing works like this and you understand it. Or if you don't understand it, you can just enjoy some crazy visuals. I don't know. Yeah, so I'd like to get complicated with it without chaining myself too much to the complication, and just does it more or less kind of make sense that this guy does this attack and that guy does that defense, and this result occurs. Um, so and I think my special effects visual language is I think it's pretty good. I enjoy it. It's simple. Um, I enjoy making it, and I enjoy the way it looks afterwards. Uh, the resultant render. I think I might want to lean a little bit more non-photo, or a little more cartoon-like. So yeah, I think also there'll be I've been thinking about this a lot, of like the different power things. It's like, okay, maybe there's a lot of magical animals on such and such a place, and so Pokeballs or some similar system, like Pokeballs might be a thing that's used. So also some scarcity being involved. Um, like there's a few fights in Rick and Morty. Yeah, there's a lot of fights in Rick and Morty that I think are really along the lines of where I want to go with this. Also, I forget what the channel's called, but there's one channel on YouTube that focused a lot on this concept of like, what if Rick would take on the Thanos and the Dragon Ball universe and all these other things, and I think that's really excellent. And yeah, kind of where I want to go with it, just not simply for Rick, but actually to make a whole universe where people are using different, make a whole intertwining cluster of narratives that basically have almost play like a JRPG. I've leaned a little bit JRPG cutscene in the way that I make this stuff, and yeah, I'm just gonna keep it that way. It's easy to produce. It looks amazing.